The man I had buried 3 years earlier answered my telephone and said, "Margaret, whatever Daniel told you, don't believe him." I froze beside my kitchen table. Rain tapped against the windows, and the old refrigerator hummed behind me. For 3 years, I had believed my father was dead. I had stood beside his casket. I had watched the cemetery workers lower it into the ground. I had visited his grave every spring with yellow roses. Yet I knew that voice. "Daddy?" There was a long pause. Then he said, "You shouldn't have been told I died." My fingers tightened around the receiver. "Where are you?" "I can't tell you that yet." "Why?" "Because Daniel may be listening." I looked toward the kitchen window. "Daniel?" My father's breathing changed. "Margaret, has your brother asked you to sign anything?" The question landed harder than it should have. "Several things." "What things?" "Property papers. He said they're related to the farm." Silence. Then Dad said, "Don't sign another page." "Daddy, what is happening?" Before he could answer, I heard another sound through the telephone. A door opening. Then a man's voice. "Dad!" My stomach dropped. I knew that voice too. "Daniel." My father whispered, "Hang up." The line went dead. I stood there staring at the receiver. My brother had just spoken to the father he claimed was dead. I didn't call either of them again. Instead, I opened the drawer where I kept the documents from my father's funeral and pulled out the papers Daniel had given me afterward. He had handled everything when Dad supposedly died. The funeral home, the cemetery, the obituary, the will. He had told me Dad left the family farm to him because that was what our father wanted. I had believed him. I was grieving, and Daniel had seemed so certain. But now I read the will again. Something felt wrong. Not obvious, just wrong. The signature looked like Dad's, but the page beneath it was strangely clean, as if it had been printed separately. The next morning I drove to the county courthouse. The clerk brought me my father's property records. I turned the pages slowly until I found a document filed 2 weeks before his supposed death. It wasn't a deed. It was a trust. And Daniel wasn't the owner. I copied the document and drove straight to the attorney whose name appeared at the bottom. Samuel Whitaker. He listened without interrupting. Then he opened a drawer and placed a sealed envelope on his desk. My father's handwriting was across the front. "Your father left this for you," he said. I stared at the envelope. "Is he alive?" Mr. Whitaker looked at me. "He was yesterday." Then he added quietly, "And Margaret, your brother doesn't know you found this." I kept my hand on the envelope but didn't open it. Why would my father leave me a letter if he knew I believed he was dead? I asked. Mr. Whitaker leaned back in his chair. "Because your father believed there were things you needed to discover yourself. That doesn't answer my question." He gave me a tired look. "No, ma'am, it doesn't." I appreciated that he didn't try to soften it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Margaret, if you're reading this, then Daniel has done what I feared he would do." I stopped there. My eyes moved to the next line. "Do not confront him. Do not tell him you found this letter. And whatever you do, don't sign anything concerning the farm." My throat tightened. "What did Daniel do?" I asked. Mr. Whitaker didn't answer. I read on. "I discovered money missing from my accounts. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I found withdrawals made under the authority. I gave Daniel when I was recovering from surgery." My heart began beating harder. Dad continued. I confronted him. He told me the money was being used to repair the farm. I checked the farm accounts. That wasn't true. I looked at Mr. Whitaker. "How much?" $84,000 that we can document so far." I lowered the letter. "My father had $84,000 stolen?" "We believe so." "And Daniel knew?" "Your father believed he did." I read the final lines. "I am not hiding because I fear losing the farm. I'm hiding because I fear what Daniel will do when he realizes I know. If he tells you I'm dead, believe nothing until you see proof." I folded the letter carefully. "Where is my father now?" Mr. Whitaker looked toward the window. "Safe. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you today." I stood. "Then I'll find him myself." For the first time, Mr. Whitaker looked concerned. "Margaret, your father specifically, asked me to keep you away from this. He also left me a letter." I picked up my purse. "And I'm 67 years old. I've buried a husband, raised children, paid bills, and survived things I never thought I would. I'm not going to let my brother decide what I can handle. Outside, the afternoon sun had finally broken through the clouds. I sat in my car and looked at the farmhouse photograph on the passenger seat. Daniel had told me Dad was dead. Now I knew he had lied, but I still didn't know why. Then my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Margaret," he said, "we need to talk about Dad's farm." I kept my voice steady. "What about the farm?" Daniel said, "Dad wanted me to have it. That's what you told me." Because it's true. I looked through my windshield at the courthouse across the street. Then why did Dad put the farm in a trust? The silence on the other end lasted too long. "What trust?" he asked. I knew then that Mr. Whitaker had been right. Daniel didn't know what I had found. "Never mind," I said. "I'll call you later." "Margaret, wait." I ended the call. I drove back to Mr. Whitaker's office and placed my phone on his desk. He doesn't know about the trust. Mr. Whitaker nodded. "Good. I want everything." He studied me. "Everything?" "Every document my father left you. Every bank record. Every letter. Every conversation concerning Daniel." Mr. Whitaker opened another file. "Your father anticipated that request." Inside were copies of bank statements, checks and withdrawal slips. I recognized Daniel's signature on several of them. The money had been taken in amounts, small enough not to attract immediate attention. 2,000 here, 4,000 there, then 10,000. Altogether, $84,000 had disappeared. "What did he spend it on?" I asked. "That's where things become complicated." Mr. Whitaker handed me a document from a landscaping company, Daniel's company. Several payments had gone from Dad's account directly into it. I stared at the figures. "He stole from our father. We can prove money moved," Mr. Whitaker said carefully. "We still need to prove why." Then he pulled out a second folder. "There's something else." Inside was a photograph. It showed my father standing outside the farmhouse beside a woman. I recognized immediately. Evelyn Parker had lived next door for almost 40 years. "Why was she photographed with Dad?" I asked. "Because she was one of the last people to see him before he disappeared." My heart stopped for a moment. "Disappeared?" Mr. Whitaker corrected himself, "before he went into hiding." He handed me another sheet. It was Evelyn's written statement. She said that 2 nights before my father's supposed death, she saw Daniel's pickup parked behind the farmhouse after midnight. Daniel wasn't alone. I read the next sentence twice. "Who was with him?" I asked. Mr. Whitaker's answer came quietly. "A man named Carl Benton." I knew that name. Carl had worked for Daniel for years. But then I reached the bottom of Evelyn's statement, and everything changed. She had written, "I heard your father shouting, and Daniel said, 'You won't tell Margaret anything.'" I read Evelyn's statement again. "He said that?" Mr. Whitaker nodded. Evelyn heard it through an open window. She didn't understand what Daniel meant at the time, and she waited 3 years to tell anyone. She was frightened. I couldn't blame her. People in small towns notice things, but that doesn't mean they always know what to do with what they see. I asked Mr. Whitaker for her telephone number. "She's waiting outside." I turned toward the door. Evelyn Parker entered slowly, carrying a worn leather purse. Her gray hair was pinned neatly behind her ears. She sat across from me and placed an old envelope on the desk. "Your father gave me this the night before he disappeared," she said. "Why didn't you give it to me?" "Because Daniel came to my house the next morning. He told me Harold had died, and he warned me not to involve myself." I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of Daniel and Carl Benton beside my father's barn. A date was written on the back, 2 nights before Dad's supposed death. "What were they doing?" I asked. Evelyn folded her hands. "Moving boxes from your father's office." "What kind of boxes?" I couldn't see inside them. That mattered. I had learned not to turn suspicion into certainty. "Did you see my father?" I asked. Evelyn looked down. "Yes, the next morning." My heart tightened. "Alive?" "Yes." The room went silent. Evelyn continued. "He was sitting on his porch. He looked exhausted. He told me he was leaving for a while." "Did he say where?" "No, but he gave me something." She reached into her purse and produced a small key. "He told me to keep it until you came asking questions." I stared at it. "What does it open?" "I don't know." Mr. Whitaker took the key and examined it. This looks like a safe deposit key. I remembered something. Years earlier, Dad had mentioned keeping important papers at the First Tennessee Bank downtown. I drove there with Evelyn beside me. The bank manager confirmed the box belonged to my father, but said I couldn't access it without proper authority. Mr. Whitaker arrived 20 minutes later with the trust documents. The box was opened. Inside were property records, old photographs, and one sealed envelope. My father's handwriting covered it. This time, however, the envelope wasn't addressed to me. It said, "For whoever discovers what Daniel did." I looked at Mr. Whitaker, then I opened it. The first line made my hands go cold. Daniel did not steal the farm. He stole the evidence that would have exposed him. I read the rest slowly. My father explained that Daniel had discovered the trust, prevented him from selling the property without my consent. He had also learned that Dad intended to divide the farm equally, between us only if Daniel repaid the money he had taken. Daniel had begged for more time. Dad refused. Then Daniel had threatened to make sure I never learned what happened. My father wrote that he feared Daniel might forge documents or pressure me into signing away my rights. So, Dad arranged for Mr. Whitaker to place the original records in the safe deposit box. He also arranged to disappear temporarily with an old friend in Kentucky. The plan had never been to abandon me. It had been to protect the evidence until Daniel revealed what he was willing to do. I looked at Mr. Whitaker. "Why didn't Dad simply tell me?" "Because he believed Daniel was watching your house," he said. That answer angered me, but I understood the fear behind it. We did not confront Daniel ourselves. Mr. Whitaker sent the documents to the bank's legal department and requested a formal accounting of every withdrawal. Evelyn gave a signed statement. Carl Benton was contacted and, after learning that the records existed, admitted he had helped Daniel remove boxes from Dad's office. Inside those boxes were old financial records and the original farm documents. The evidence was enough. Daniel couldn't explain the missing money, the unauthorized transfers, or why he had repeatedly told me Dad was dead. The court froze the disputed accounts and protected the farm under the trust. Daniel was ordered to repay the money he had taken and lost control of the property. There was no shouting in court. No dramatic punishment, just paperwork, testimony, and consequences. My father returned home several weeks later. When I saw him sitting on the porch, I stood there for a moment before walking over. He looked older. "I'm sorry," he said. I sat beside him. "I know." We watched the evening settle over the pasture while crickets sang beyond the porch. Daniel eventually stopped calling. Some relatives stopped defending him. Folks notice more than people think. I never received some enormous fortune. I received something more valuable. My father's trust, my share of the family farm, and the knowledge that I had stood my ground without becoming bitter. Looking back, I learned that justice doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, in a courthouse file, a witness statement, and a woman finally saying, "No, I won't sign that." And sometimes, the strongest inheritance a family can leave behind is the courage to tell the truth.